everybody, and welcome back to Ask the Unfaithful. My name is Sam. We are thrilled that you are joining us. As always, my counterpart and hero, James Anir, is with me today. How are you, my good friend and brother?
How am I supposed to respond to that, man? Hero. Woo!
We're keeping it real here. I'm the eye candy, you're the heroic celebrity.
I
It's how we do it.
don't know. What's that song, Shortchange Hero?
Well, I mean, if we're gonna start pulling songs, there's gonna be lots of songs that we
Right
pull
on.
out
Yeah.
today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I am great. How are you?
I'm feeling pretty good. It's been a long, arduous week. We're filming this on a Thursday. I wish today was Friday, and I wish it was a 17-day weekend. But I'm feeling pretty strong. And so, for those of you who have been watching our previous episodes, welcome back. For those of you who are new to Ask the Unfaithful, I would encourage you to watch some of the older episodes to help you understand. We are doing our best to give back. We're doing our best to help those who might be unfaithful or might be betrayed, trying to make sense out of the cacophony of infidelity and addiction. And what do you do? How do you heal? I put out a little reel on Instagram, James, and I was hesitant about it. I thought, man, whatever, I'll do it. I wasn't going to post it because I knew you and I were going to film, and I've got another guy coming in, and I filmed it, and I had so many people reach out and go, that makes so much sense. That helps me so much. Thank you for doing that. And I was just honored and amazed. And I get so much feedback about your podcasts with me. You guys have to get phenomenal feedback from the intensives that you do and the material that you put out, right?
Yeah. It's very gratifying in the sense that, you know, our biggest goal is that people heal.
Yeah,
And that they honestly that they can have the best life that they can possibly have. And not everybody moves forward as a couple. With us, we have an extremely high success rate over time, 92% actually. That's over, the 10-year period. Not for everybody,
right.
because we've just seen people, but that's we're really, I think, fortunate to have that. And more, it's not our fortune, it's the people who are having relationships like they've never had before. And that's our goal. That's
Exactly.
what we want.
It's exactly right. A lot of what we do is helping couples understand, especially on this podcast, The Unfaithful. You can get through this. You can heal. You can experience personal restoration without question, hopefully, marital or relational restoration as well. So today we're jumping into a topic that it's personal to me. I really believe that resentment was one of the principal factors to my infidelity. I believe it was a pillar that created vulnerability for me to do what I did 20 some odd years ago. The question that we're talking about today is, why is resentment so destructive in the life of the unfaithful? But before you answer that, I think it would be better for you to give us a definition of what you, an expert who runs intensives, who cares for couples and individuals too many hours, over too many years, over too many days, what would be your definition of resentment that you and Sharon use?
So, as usual with me, it's a little on the complex side, but that's okay. It's probably not as complex as I think it is. So, essentially, resentment is, the unacknowledged and unexpressed, right? So internally unacknowledged, right? And unexpressed kind of indignation at a perceived poor treatment or unfair or unjust treatment that festers, i.e., it's usually held on to for a period of time. My friend Stacy Sprout, our friend Stacy Sprout, says 2 weeks, and I think that's fair. If it's over 2 weeks, then one can consider it resentment. So
Really?
yeah, I think so, because there has to be some time. It doesn't mean that you can't have a resentment before that, but then it's mostly about the anger, right? But
I had resentment for years. I think most of us sit back and
right,
go, we have years of resentment that we're not trying to blame just the resentment. We're trying to uncover. We're trying to do one of my new favorite words that you have used in this niche is we're trying to do an autopsy on why did we act out. Eventually, would you say, I would say this, if you did an autopsy on unfaithful males and females together in a group, I would roll the dice and say at least 80% of them were probably dealing with resentment. Would you agree?
absolutely. So, we talked about, I think in our last episode, perhaps, the maybe no, I think it was the one before, but the reason for relapse is, really, do I exist, right? It proves to ourselves that we exist. When it comes to thoughts, feelings, behavioral causes for relapse, we're talking about resentment being the number one, right? Because it takes us down that path. If we're resenting the person that we're with, we're going to be in turmoil.
Yes.
All right, it took me a while to come up with that word, but in turmoil, right?
And we're not safe. If we're in turmoil, we're not safe,
No,
right?
not at all. So there's a link between resentment and shame, and I'll get to that. But really, the in Alcoholics Anonymous, for long, well before I was born, there's this HALT, HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I add to that S, which is shame. So shout, right? Or halts, whichever one you want. But shame is a huge one, right? So that's when we're in so much danger. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired is when we have to be on the lookout, right? And so shame comes into that. Well, resentment is related to both anger and shame. Just as an aside, it's, well, not really. Big aside, you love these bombs, but resentment is a block to empathy as well, right?
Oh, 100%. I think when I talk to unfaithfuls in my coaching sessions and I notice a lack of empathy, my number one go-to is I'll say, listen, it appears to me that possibly there might be a large amount of resentment that's welling up inside of you. And I've never had someone say, no, no, that's not it at all. And I think that's exactly right. As long as you said a couple of key words about resentment, as long as it's festering, it's, I would say sometimes it's lying to us.
Yeah,
It's telling us
absolutely.
you're justified.
Mhm.
You should. It's something that you deserve. Look at all the pain. Look at all the hurt. Look at all the mistreatment, right?
Yeah, so, I relate shoulds to shame. If you go right? Should, shame. If you're saying I should do this, or I should do that, or somebody else should do this or should do that, it's really coring in on shame. And we can do another episode directly on shame, because I think it's such a big topic. We could probably do several.
Sure.
There's a piece to this that's really important, because in when doing an autopsy on resentment, you're going to sort of, one of the parts is asking who am I resenting, and why? What did they do? Right? Well, what they did is typically hitting a wound, right? It's not necessarily that you resent them just for that action. There's always something deeper. So what is that, right? It's not just the emotion of feeling angry. It's, what did they really hit? And that's why I said, in the definition, perceived poor treatment, unfair, unjust, right? It's perceived. Not because it isn't unfair or unjust necessarily, although often when you do the autopsy on it, you figure out that it's not really.
Right.
Um, but it definitely feels that way. And so that's coming from a wound somewhere in your life, typically in childhood, right? And it doesn't have to be specific. So somebody can have a very specific wound surrounding being unjustly treated, or unfairness, or poor treatment. And then what happens is anything that even remotely looks like it, even if it's not, remotely feels like it, I should say, right, is also a trigger for resentment.
That's exactly on point with so much of what you read out there. And resentment is an intimacy killer,
Ah,
right?
absolutely. You can't really, there's no way you can have intimacy if there's resentment from one side or the other or both. It can't happen.
So, with resentment being as toxic as it is, for those that are the unfaithful,
Mhm.
we're going to drop a nuclear bomb on them right now because if they're dealing with resentment, would you agree that it is one of the biggest precursors to relapse?
Oh, without a doubt. So when you do a relapse autopsy, like we talked about, right, you look at there, nobody just relapses. There's
Okay, hold
always,
on. Hold on. As the older folks would say, stop the presses because there's so many unfaithful that just say, I don't know what happened. I don't know. Things were going so great. We were doing so well. And then I just acted out. I don't know why. I'm not going to yell in your face, liar. I'm going to say there's absolutely a reason why you relapse. So build on what you just said.
so first of all, I have a little resentment going here, Sam, because I am one of those old folks who go stop the presses.
It's not going to last 2 weeks. You're safe. You're fine.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, resentment. If you have a resentment, then there's the angry part. There's the shame part. And that's the shame part's a little bit more complex, but we'll just go with the anger right now. So when we look back at why somebody relapsed, you can find where they got angry. Where is that resentment's the number one? So that's one of the initial questions is, okay, are you feeling resentful of something? Did somebody really hurt you, or did you feel hurt? Right.
Or where did the wound get hit again, right? Where did
Exactly.
the where did the unhealed wound get triggered again, which then reveals more work needs to be done. Is that fair?
That's very fair. And I'm going to add to that that not everybody's going to be fully aware of their wounds, right? That takes a lot of work. I mean, you and I have done an awful lot of work to get to that place. And honestly, we continue to do work, and sometimes we discover much more sort of things that we wouldn't have even considered before. So this isn't, it's right now the job of anybody who's really early on, and this is just finding the big stuff, right? The
Yeah.
big things where that are causative. And resentment is one of the biggest, well, it is the biggest, other than the existence piece. And uh, it's also one of the most obvious. So that's actually lucky, because that means, okay, where am I, who am I resenting, what am I resenting? And you can identify that typically pretty quickly, because I am so pissed at her, or I'm so mad at him.
Yeah.
And then you can start to look at the whys and start digging deeper.
Is it fair to say those things are accompanied by a turbo when those things are actually coming out of wounds that we have from childhood, but in the eyes of the unfaithful, in the mind, they have created this rejection. Maybe it's transference, maybe it's projection, but they have created this idea
Mhm.
inside to justify their affair, which we're not saying it justifies. However, it sounds like maybe that unfaithful, and I'm going through all this, James, because I think there's unfaithful out there going, wait a minute, wait a minute. So you're saying the wounds and the pain and the hurt, yes, it showed up with my spouse, but maybe it started when I was a child,
Right.
and now it is blowing up in my face. Would you agree?
I would agree. There are some who are going to. There are a number of people actually who have a hard time because it's childhood. Their parents, their image of their parents, is can be sacrosanct, right? Messages we get in childhood, of yeah, what's in the family stays in the family, things like that,
Sure.
and sometimes it's a matter of feeling good about yourself, to believe that your family was perfect. But the thing is, nobody's perfect. So you can have a really good childhood, and
Absolutely.
there's still places that are unmet. It's not about necessarily being traumatized or neglected or, a trauma of omission or commission, right? It's really, most of it is the unmet needs, right? The things that are innocently not met, you know,
Yeah,
no fault
that's great.
of parents. So those are, it's a blameless inventory of what, that you have to take of what happened. And this is one of the ways into it, right? Where are my resentments? So resentments, when we can go directly to where, what resentments did I have coming out of childhood?
Mm,
Ooh, that can show us those wounds very quickly. Now, it's not easy for everybody to do that, right? So really the analysis usually comes from what's the resentment that's going on right now and looking back at where that might. So you talked about, you know, I'm rejected, I'm not wanted, and so on. Well, okay, let's take that language. Where have I
mhm.
felt not wanted before,
Yeah,
right?
that's that's the expert in you that says, okay, where did that start? When do you first remember feeling that? How old did you feel? How old do you sometimes feel now?
Yeah.
And I think one of the most insightful messages my therapist ever told me. I remember the first time he said it to me, I cried. He said, Sam, what was the message that you needed when you were young and you did not get?
Ah, how beautiful. What a beautiful statement or question.
He's it gives me chills to say it, to recount the moment he said it to me, and I looked at him and I was like, don't do it, Sam. Don't do it, Sam. And the waterworks just came. And I remember just falling apart. And he looked at me and he goes, looks like we tapped into something, didn't we? And I have a terrible cry voice. I'm going to try and never cry when we do this because the cry talking voice is just it's disgusting. I hate it. I have some self-shame there. But I remember trying to get the words out because it set me free. It just absolutely zipped me wide open in a way that I have few experiences like that.
I love that basic question. That's just so beautiful.
I think you are talking so deeply. I want the listener, the viewer to understand this is an expert that helps unzip people's hearts and lives on a daily basis. And that question of where did this first start happening? And then you can go, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm in this affair or I have been involved in this affair because I'm actually reenacting patterns or I'm trying to heal this pain I felt from my dad or my mom or children of alcoholics or what have you. To bring it back home, nobody just relapses. Nobody just wakes up and has an affair, right?
No, no, I think I've said it before. Nobody wakes up going, "Oh, I think I'll be an unfaithful. I think I'll be, I'll be compulsive or I'll be an addict or, you know, it's not like people at 7 are going, their friends are going, hey, I want to be an astronaut. I want to be a cowboy. I want to be president of the United States. Oh, I want to be an addict, man.
Nobody wants to
That's
blow up their life. Nobody wants to just
nobody wants,
self-destruct.
right. And nobody wants to destroy their partner, but it happens.
Yeah.
And there's reasons it happens. And it's not just about the behaviors. You have to address the behaviors. Absolutely. They're, and they're 1% of the problem, but they're an essential 1% to address, obviously. Um, then you got
Hold
about,
on.
uh,
Hold on. Uh-oh.
okay,
Why are the behaviors 1% of the problem?
because the next 19% are the emotions that are immediately causative of the behaviors. So fear, anger, sadness, and so on, typically negative. Although positive can also make you go, oh, I like this, then let me reward myself further. But typically those things go to the behavior, right? The acting out, the self-soothing. The 80% that's left is what Sharon and I call the junkyard, right? So that is where all of the unmet childhood needs, all of the traumas, all of the traumas of commission, omission. So commission would be abuse, omission would be like neglect, right? So but either one is active. The unmet
Mm.
childhood needs is typically not an active wound. In other words, it's not actively done, but the wound is very, very deep regardless, right?
Okay.
Because as a child, we deserve 100% of those. So that's why the 80% is all of that, 19% of the emotions, and then the 1% is the resultant behaviors. And yet the behaviors are what we focus on. There's a whole body of therapy that surrounds behavioral work, right? There's nothing wrong with it, but it won't resolve 80%. I mean, it might resolve some of it, right? But it's not going to resolve the 80. And what does that mean? It means it's not going to stop the drives for the behaviors. So we can
And then
control
people
behavior, right?
people are white knuckling it, trying to just not cheat, not cheat. And I I just rattle off the statement, there is a better way.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to get sidetracked today because I think resentment is such a pinnacle piece of the puzzle. So let me ask you this. So maybe there's someone listening and they're like, you know what? Okay, Sam. All right, James, I'll buy in. I got a lot of resentment. I think I have resentment that I haven't even really processed from my childhood. So you know what, guys? I'll give you the fact that there's some resentment. What do they do about it?
All right. So if it's sort of out, so if it's this outward resentment, so there's always key to this. There's resentment against the outside person. And remember the finger pointing out and the three pointing back, there's resentment against yourself. So let's do the outside first. Okay.
Okay.
We'll work outside in. So first thing you're going to do is, okay, just identify who. That's pretty easy, right? Okay. And then what happened? What are you mad about? Right? What does it feel like? And here's the key. Where do you feel that in your body? The reason that you want to do that is because your body tells you what's happening long before your brain does. So as
Hmm.
you practice that, you can get used to intervening earlier because this is a trauma spiral. And a thoughtful or a cognitive intervention usually occurs before you go into fight, flight, freeze. Fight, flight, freeze is not controllable. It's not controllable emotion. And so that's when you lash out, or that's when you run and look for self soothing, or that's when you are absolutely stuck still, not knowing what to do. Um,
Right.
then you ask yourself, well, what wound did it hit? And those wounds are going to be, you know, is it in my feeling of connection and belonging? Is it in my feeling of capability? Is it hitting safety, which is trust, right? Then hitting my trust. Is it hitting my spiritual realm, right? My beliefs? Is it hitting,
Is it hitting shame?
yeah,
Right? Is it hitting
shame? Is
shame?
it hurting pride, ego? So, but shame, yeah. So can I move into shame here a little bit? So, look,
Absolutely.
the big thing here is that this is going to sound a little weird, but our ability to hold resentments is directly related to our ability to forgive ourselves.
That's fair. I think, isn't it sometimes we have such a hard time forgiving other people because we can't forgive ourselves? Is that fair? Or is that an oversimplification?
That's true. It's true.
Okay.
It might be an oversimplification in sort of that area of cliches. I'm not saying it's cliche, but where cliches.
I think he just insulted me. I'm just kidding.
You are not cliche, I promise. Um,
Okay.
no, when they seem to not mean very much, it's harder to grasp that a little bit. And
Sure.
it's
Makes
very,
sense.
yeah, cliches are very true, right? Otherwise, they wouldn't be. Um,
Right.
so here's the deal with self forgiveness: is that it is directly related to to shame. Um, and so what we have to do is we have to be able to discern between guilt and shame, because guilt is about behavior, shame is about the self, right? Um, so if we can then say, draw from that, shame resilience is therefore self forgiveness. No, not self permissiveness. That's
Hmm.
very different. Being self permissive allows you to act out, self forgiveness does not. We often confuse those. And then we go into that. And so, what is a key piece of what's guilt? If we don't like what we did, we can feel remorse over it, right? That's healthy.
Yeah.
If we feel regret about regret, that's more about who we are. So a regret is a resentment against yourself.
Hmm.
Now that's not mine, that's old school AA stuff, right? And if it's
Yeah.
so thus if you have a resentment against yourself, you are in shame.
I'm always taking notes when we talk. I meet with you all the time, and I still constantly learn from you. And so guilt is about our behavior, shame is about ourself. And so would it be fair to say this resentment is what helps produce shame spirals in the unfaithful, where they just retreat into shame?
Absolutely. So absolutely. So a shame spiral is a trauma spiral because it's
Oh, hold on. Shame. Now, the reason that struck me is because oftentimes people will say, don't shame spiral, as if it's just, hey, don't get into your shame. Don't be soft. Don't be a jerk. But you're saying a shame spiral is a trauma spiral.
sure. Because if we hadn't learned somewhere that it was about us, right, or interpreted how we were being treated as something is defective in us, something's wrong with us, and that's shame, right? Then that's trauma. That's traumatic. Something's wrong with me, So we're talking, what child should ever learn that, whether it's done deliberately or just through not getting needs met, that they're not enough or they're not worthy. And so they really attach shame to who they are, right? And everything gets to be from that perspective. So then every time they mess up, every time they fail, so every time they're not perfect, right? They then go into shame. And it becomes basically a shame based life,
Yep.
which answers,
So good.
which is intolerable, right? And so, of course, we throw out blame, we project onto other people, and then we have resentments because they hit that shame wound.
The reason I love so much of the way that you do this is I'm hoping that a betrayed listening can sit back and say, there's reasons why my unfaithful do what they do. It doesn't excuse it. It doesn't, we're not trying to say, hey, betrayed, kind of go easy on them. They've just put your life through a wood chipper, but go easy. No, no, no. But until we understand why they do what they do, it we're just we're just chasing the fruit, not getting to the root, as they say. But I'm hoping that as some of the betrayeds are listening, lights are coming on, like, my partner has some deep wounds,
Yeah.
and we may change behaviors, but if we don't address those wounds, we're going to be back here in between 2 and 5 years. And
Yeah.
so I think the lights come on where you go, man, this is not something that a quick little book is going to fix. Couple sessions, couple exercises, that's not going to fix this stuff, right? This is the
I,
long haul.
you know what? I would give up my career if I could wave that kind of magic wand and heal everybody.
It's chess, not checkers, right?
It really is. It really is. So, one of that does speak to one of the starting things to letting go of resentment is being able to express it honestly with somebody, preferably not the person that you're holding the resentment against, because you got to work through some stuff. right?
Right.
So expressing it to somebody who can hold that and hear it, not agree with you, but hear it and validate your feelings, right? Which is different than validating facts, because feelings aren't facts. You have feelings that don't stand up in the face of logic. And it's always dangerous to negate the feeling based on logic. You have to give it its due. Um, so having somebody who can hear your lament and help you by challenging your thinking with that,
Yeah.
but not shaming you for having those feelings, right? Um, is really important. And the partner who's been betrayed is not the person, because the partner, to heal herself, has to step away from that natural empathy that they have for the actor, for the unfaithful, by setting boundaries. When
Yeah.
somebody is early in recovery and going through this withdrawal stage, that's going to feel like a wound is being hit, because the empathy, the nurture is being withdrawn. But as my beautiful Sharon says, nurturing is a mothering word, not a wifing word. Loving is a wifing word. That's a
Okay.
whole other thing, ain't it?
Woo! I was like, okay, all right. Listen, this has been, I think for me, when I look back upon my massive moral failure, the number one word that comes out to me was resentment. The number two word was alone. Alone in my thoughts, alone in my reasonings, alone in my anger. I look back oftentimes and think, I had people around me. I don't blame them. I blame me. I'm not saying, oh, if people would have loved me better. No. But part of the reason that we do this is to help people understand they're not alone,
Yeah.
and to help unfaithfuls know that they're not alone, and betrayeds know they're not alone. And we don't pretend to have all the answers, but we have some answers. So as we say goodbye, James, what would you say to the unfaithful out there who we were 25 some odd 30 years ago, lost, confused, angry, full of resentment, but needing a compassionate nudge in a direction? What do you say to them?
It's hard to be compassionate toward yourself when you have no experience doing it, when you have no apparent reason to do it, because we are so stuck in our shame when we're acting out, and it reinforces it so deeply that that resentment against ourselves is huge. So we need to do the opposite of what we often feel, and that's to actually connect with somebody on a deep level. In other words, just saying our emotions and being able to trust that person to handle whatever emotions are coming towards them. That is specifically not your spouse or your partner. That is specifically somebody who has some experience, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a sponsor in a 12-step program, which again, I'll emphasize, you don't have to, totally believe that, hey, I'm an addict, or, there are 12 steps for compulsives. You know, if it's not about the sexual behavior, go to ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families, which pretty much describes every family in the world. So, I think
Yes.
everybody belongs there, and it's really amazing to have that kind of help. That you need. You have to be able to talk to somebody who can hear you for everything that you believe, think, feel, and not judge you for it. Help you with
Yeah.
it, right? And so that's the number one thing I would say. Don't stay alone. Don't stay in your own head. Our, I swear, when I was first starting out, man, my brain was like a monkey up there doing its thing. I couldn't make sense out of anything. And all the conclusions that I drew were based on my wounds, and they were not accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. I know it well. Thank you again for tuning in. If you would like to reach out to us, if you'd like to schedule a session, if you'd like to learn more about intensives or coaching, or maybe help that we can suggest for you, you can reach out to us at asktheunfaithful@gmail.com, or leave a comment on any of our podcasts. Whether you're unfaithful or betrayed, remember you are worth the effort to heal. Thanks for tuning in. Take care.